Hello, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about over at DCSMI from all over the data center ecosystem, regardless of whether you're part of a data center operator, a technology or a facilities company that sells to or partners with data centers, or perhaps you're from a construction or real estate or capital related company, or maybe something having to do with outsourced sales and marketing. But regardless of what your company does in the data center ecosystem, if you want to learn about some of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that your peers are facing across the full go-to-market team, across sales, marketing, customer success, product management, channel partnerships, and the executive leadership, executive sponsor, for sure you are in the right place. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, make sure that you subscribe to our data center sales and marketing newsletter that will come directly to your email inbox on Sundays. To subscribe, you can go to www.dcsmi.com. So what is on the agenda for today? Well, we're going to be tackling 6 of the big sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about most recently. This includes how to find new wholesale data center leads and improve brand recognition, how to create informative, structured cabling content that's relevant to your target buyer, as well as how data center critical facilities companies can get more industrial construction sales. After that, we'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. And during the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, we'll look at how an electrical and mechanical engineering firm can respond to high-speed data center related demand. I think it's actually just high data center related demand. How an electrical and mechanical engineering firm can respond to high data center related demand. How a data center racks and accessories provider can develop new sales channels. And as we head down the home stretch, how to improve mission critical data center sales outreach for design, build, and data center related management. So without any further ado, let's jump right into this week's first question. How do we find new wholesale data center leads and improve brand recognition? So wholesale generally implies that you're building a shell and you're going to either turn that shell over to a data center operator or lease out huge parts of it. But generally, wholesale data center operators are selling large amounts of space that are typically way, way larger than a co-location agreement would be. And in many cases, too, there's parts of it that are left not completely finished. They're leaving it up to the operator to decide which parts of it on the inside they want to build to suit or complete with their needs. There's often somewhat of a blurry line between being a wholesale data center provider, wholesale data center operator, and a hyperscale related and selling to hyperscale related clients. But for this particular purpose, we are looking for large buyers of data center related space and power and telecommunications. So to find these leads and improve brand recognition, we need to get really tight about where we think our company can win most often and where our clients, where our tenants, where our partners can be satisfied most often with our offering. And there's 2 ways to approach this. If you have an established company that's been in business for multiple years, you more than likely have a case studies page on your website, who we help on your website, logos on your website. All of that should start giving you clues about the consensus on where you do best, the kinds of clients that are the happiest, that onboard the smoothest, that are thrilled with what you provide, that expand the relationship over time. And once we know the consensus on what an ideal client looks like, then we can go document your ideal client profile. So we'll know when it comes to finding leads and improving brand recognition, we'll have an idea of where we're going to go. So we actually have a direction to our lead generation program and lead nurturing and sales acceleration and brand building program. So start by figuring out at a company level where you're going to do best, where they're located. In other words, are you looking for potential wholesale data center clients just in your immediate local area where the facility is? Or are you looking for clients all over your country, all over your continent, potentially all over the globe? Data center operators usually have two different playbooks going on. They usually have a hyper-local playbook that's extremely conducive to tons of local events. And then they potentially have a national or global playbook where a lot of the early and middle stage interactions may be happening virtually. So with that in mind, define geographically where you can win best. Second, define what size these ideal clients, what size these ideal tenants are that are going to want your wholesale data center space. What's too small and what's too big? And when I say small and big in size, let's just clarify here. We're not necessarily talking about the size of your facility, the square footage or the square meters. We're not necessarily talking about the kilowatts or megawatts that you have available. What we're talking about here is purely from a sales marketing playbook, go-to-market playbook, is we more than likely need a revenue range or a employee headcount range of what size companies we're looking for. And the reason that employee headcount range can be especially helpful is if you're doing anything on LinkedIn with like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Campaign Manager, LinkedIn standardizes based on the number of employees. So if you determine for your wholesale data center related services that there's no chance that companies below a certain size would be able to afford your minimums, well, that number of employees needs to be in the bottom end of the range in your ideal client profile. In the case of a wholesale data center provider, maybe 50 employees is the minimum size that they would be to have enough revenue, have enough resources to afford your wholesale data center. Maybe it's 200 employees. I don't know. Only you can answer that based on your minimums, your roadmap, your input from your CFO and your executive team. At the upper end of the range, what's too big? Are you really good at selling wholesale, but does there come a point where an enterprise is so large that the sales process is too long, the complication, the financial complications, the political complications, all of that stuff is too complicated at a certain size? So maybe in this particular case, you decide that you're looking for ideal clients that have anywhere between 200 and 1,000 employees, or 200 employees up to maybe 5,000 employees. Maybe you've determined that above 5,000 employees, it's just way too complex of needs, and it's far more likely that they're going to want a different kind of provider than what you necessarily have. And again, your mileage will vary. I'm just walking you through this framework. So we've narrowed it down by geography in terms of lead generation and building our brand recognition. We've narrowed it down by company size. I also want you to give serious thought to industry and business model on your target clients for your lead gen and brand recognition. Why is that important? Because for a data center operator, when you overlay or you intersect or Venn diagram, whatever you want to call it, the combination of a geographic region and a specific industry, a lot of times compliance requirements come up. And if you're able to meet or exceed those compliance requirements, you're in great shape. If you can't, you're probably automatically disqualified. So think about those three factors: geography, employee headcount as a proxy for company size and affordability or suitability for what you're doing, as well as their business model or their industry. And the good news with all three of those factors, geography, employee headcount, and industry, they're all things that you can very easily look for on LinkedIn, especially in LinkedIn Sales Navigator and targeting for outbound on doing research and outbound on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, as well as potentially running ads campaigns on LinkedIn Campaign Manager. They all work very, very well with those three variables, either together or separately. So now that we have your ideal client profile, we need to figure out who the stakeholders are that you need to build relationships with in these companies in order to be able to advance your sales process. And again, this is going to depend a great deal on the nature of your offering. It's going to depend on the size of companies that you target, where you're located. However, directionally, wholesale data center space for a lot of companies can be such a strategic investment that it's going all the way up to a chief investment officer, a chief financial officer, a CEO, a board level. So you just really have to figure out, based on your existing sales process and the ideal clients that you have sold to in the past, when you look at your CRM, who are the stakeholders that you need to be building relationships with. And you'll typically designate these as buyer personas. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal stakeholder based on actual research and some select educated speculation. Why are buyer personas so important in today's data center marketplace? Well, we now live in an industry where so much of the researching and comparing options and evaluating pricing happens in a self-service, self-driven kind of mode. It used to be like 10 years ago that your sales team could count on being involved in about half of the sales cycle, about half of the buyer's journey. 10 years ago, the number that was often referenced from CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner, was 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before vendor contact or sales contact. So you still got to spend 44% of that buyer's journey with your prospects and clients. Add in 10 years of digital transformation, add in a lot of baby boomers retiring, a lot more Gen Z and millennials being in decision-making roles, massive amounts of digital acceleration, and of course, 2 years of millions of people working from home at the start of the 2020s during the pandemic. And all of that has led to a place now where 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before vendor contact. So 83% of research and comparing options and evaluating pricing happens now with your sales team basically being locked out of this process. And this is a huge, huge challenge for a lot of companies that depend on an old school legacy, very traditional sales and marketing playbook, or that really haven't adjusted much in the last 10 years. But it's also a really big opportunity for those wholesale data center operators that are able to understand what's going on in the marketplace and adjust, adapt, and reinvent their sales team. They're actually the whole client-facing team across the full go-to-market, marketing, sales, account managers, product managers, channel partnership managers, and reinvent those team members to no longer be seen by their traditional job titles, but now be seen in the marketplace more as teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and the really, really seasoned, experienced members on your client-facing team may even be seen as thought leaders. The junior members, they may be more like tour guides or concierges, just pointing your prospects and clients in the direction of some of the great expert resources that you have in-house. But everyone needs to think about the job title that sits in their email signature, on their LinkedIn profile, on their business card. Because the reality is, in a world now where your prospects and clients no longer have much need to spend very much of the sales cycle or their buyer's journey with members of your team, we need to do better. We need to figure out a way to get you in early and often in front of the right people in the right places at the right time. And most of all, in the right context, so that your team members are seen as experts that your prospects and clients actually want to spend time with, as opposed to your client-facing team, especially your AEs, your account executives, and your sales development reps, feeling like they're chasing prospects and begging for attention. And when you make this transformative shift, not only does this improve the quality and the quantity of your lead generation, but also makes an enormous difference on your brand recognition in the marketplace. Now, another think about 10 years ago difference is 10 years ago when it came to branding in the data center industry, this was something that was typically owned by a creative director who was part of your marketing team. Your brand today is no longer limited to just your hexadecimal colors and your fonts and your logo and your trade dress. No, your brand is now everything that the marketplace says about your company when you're not in the room. And given that you're, for the most part, not in the room very much of the time anymore, like 83% of the time you're being locked out of the room, your educational content, your educational events are your best opportunity to earn your way back into the room and earn a seat on their side of the table. So when it comes to finding new wholesale data center leads and improving brand recognition, it's incredibly important to recognize and appreciate just how much the buyer's journey has changed, to think about the culture changes that need to happen within your company throughout your full go-to-market team across sales, marketing, account managers, product managers, channel partner managers, and the executive leadership team, and make sure that these culture changes start from the top down. Because especially in a small to mid-sized company, anywhere up to maybe 500 employees, this is such an important strategic initiative, strategic vision kind of moment that someone all the way at the top of the org chart needs to say, going forward, We will prioritize making it so our company is seen as the definitive go-to experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with being a wholesale data center provider in this geographic region for companies this size in these industries. It is that important. Obviously, if you're from a huge enterprise data center operator, like a huge publicly held REIT, it's possible that your internal champion on this enterprise-wide initiative maybe is a chief commercial officer or a chief revenue officer or a chief marketing officer or something like that. But I can assure you that if it doesn't start at that level, there's always going to be some back burner reason that continues to marginalize your company's long-term interests. So if you are super serious about finding new wholesale data center leads and improving brand recognition, make sure that you recognize and operate your playbook in today's modern buyer's journey, not in the buyer's journey from 10 years ago. Next question. Actually, if you're getting great value from this data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A show, make sure that you smash the like button, or just hit the like button. I'm not telling you to smash your keyboard or anything like that. Hit the like button, and perhaps even add a question for us to consider in an upcoming data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A live stream. You can just add those in the comments. So next question up is, how do we create informative, structured cabling content that is relevant to the target buyer? How do we create informative, structured cabling related content that's relevant to the target buyer? So we are now talking about a technology related company that does things related to cabling and connectivity, directly related to network infrastructure, and directly related to connecting up to the telecommunications, patch panels, routers, switches, meet me rooms, interconnections, carrier hotel, all that stuff. So how do we create informative content for a structured cabling company that wants it to be relevant to its target buyers? So the question is, who does the structured cabling typically sell to at data center operators and enterprise data centers? You're typically talking about a data center manager. It could be data center engineering. It could be data center operations. It could be a telecommunications manager. If it's a really small data center operation, it may be a CTO or VP of IT. So again, the job titles and the roles and the responsibilities are going to vary quite a bit depending on how big or small that particular facility is, how big or small that particular company is, whether they're single site, multi-site. But at the end of the day, so you're going to figure out, for selling your structured cabling related services, you'll have an idea as to where you can sell and sell and service profitably. Are you able to sell globally? Do you just sell in one particular country? Can you sell across a whole continent? Are you just selling in a particular metro area or a few metro areas? So first, nail that down. Second, nail down what company size is a really good fit for your client, what's so small that they wouldn't be able to afford your minimums, and what's so large that they may do a lot of the work that you would do on an outsourced basis in-house. So nail that down, and then also think about if there's certain business models or industries that those particular clients align with that are especially good fit for your unique expertise, usually because it's something related to regulatory kinds of issues or some other kinds of compliance requirements. So you've identified your target buyers, you know who your buyer persona is, and really small companies, again, it could be all the way as high up as a VP of IT or CTO or something like that. And mid-sized companies, probably it's one level below that. It's some head of telecommunications or VP of network infrastructure or digital infrastructure or something like that. And you're trying to figure out, like, okay, who's the most important, who's the second most important category of stakeholder that we need to build a relationship with. And then once we've prioritized and designated a primary buyer persona and a secondary buyer persona, we need to do our homework and do our research and to understand what's going on in each of those stakeholders' worlds. In other words, what's the consensus on the goals that they're trying to achieve in their professional lives that could cause them to get a promotion, goals that are either unique to their own jobs, could be unique to their teams, could be unique to their companies. And then the flip side is, what are the challenges? What are the struggles? What are the stressors that are driving them nuts? What are the kinds of things that if structured cabling goes completely off the rails, their work-life balance is completely out the window? What are some of the things with structured cabling that if it gets totally screwed up, they could be on vacation and the vacation gets ruined and their significant other and their family members are fuming pissed at them because they're constantly getting interrupted because of a structured cabling related problem back at work. So what are the biggest stressors? What are the biggest goals and challenges? And when we aggregate that for each of your buyer personas, we should end up with a consensus around that. And we don't just guess what these are. Sure, you can start by asking people that have been at your company for quite some time, but that internal input should maybe be 20-25% of building buyer personas. Most of your research for figuring this out, for figuring out the consensus around their goals and challenges and what they prioritize when they're researching and making purchases decisions around structured cabling, where they hang out online and offline, most of that needs to come from actual research. Best way to do the research is face-to-face. The second best would be video interviews. If you can't get access to actual people for face-to-face or phone interviews or video interviews, the next best thing would be finding 10, 20 representative people in each of those segments and get their LinkedIn profiles and see on their LinkedIn profiles what the consensus is for their biggest goals and their biggest challenges and where they hang out online and offline, what skills they're endorsed for, and then take those same names and company names, the individual, first name, last name, and the company name, and put those in search, like a Google search or something like that, and see what comes back. See if you can find any trade journals that they've been quoted in, news releases, conferences that they've spoken at, guest blogs, anything that gives you their own words. So in addition to how they describe themselves on their LinkedIn profile and the kind of content that they interact with and kind of events they attend, and that'll certainly give you a consensus about what they care about. Then also you'll be able to get their own words. And when you're doing this research, if you happen to find any multimedia content, like recordings from a conference they spoke at, or a webinar or a podcast interview or something, that's off the charts fantastic, because not only do you get the topic and their words, but you can size up the body language and intonations and really get a feel for the next best thing to spending a half hour with that person. So we roll all of that consensus together and we prioritize based on which of the stakeholders have the biggest influence on how structured cabling purchases are researched, compared, priced out, and ultimately go along those 28 steps between complete stranger to purchase decision. We roll all of that together, and then we can build a content strategy, an event strategy around educating and building trust with the most important kind of stakeholder and the second most important kind of stakeholder. Everyone usually asks for advice on, like, how do you get to the decision maker? And what I usually push back on is, are you really sure that it's just a decision maker? Because in most large size data center related sales opportunities, even if you manage to get to the magic person who's ultimately going to sign off, people have gotten so ridiculously risk averse that in most cases, they're going to send you back to their team, their direct reports, and say, go meet with them. Make sure that they agree that you're the best structured cabling company. And if they do, then we'll get together and we'll talk about moving forward with all of this. So the reality is there really is not a single or a singular decision maker anymore. It's usually a decision-making committee. And the better job you understand the different stakeholders that have a vote on those decision-making committee seats, primary buyer persona, secondary buyer personas, maybe there's a third category, a tertiary buyer persona. It's possible in a structured cabling related context that someone from finance or operations is going to get involved, or risk management is going to get involved, because all that low voltage stuff, they may have a different way of looking at it than other kinds of companies. But you need to find the consensus of the kinds of stakeholders that you need to educate and build trust. And then your goal is to become the definitive go-to expert when it comes to anything and everything having to do with structured cabling for companies in this particular geographic region that are roughly this size, in these kinds of industries and business models, and show up early and often, because the more of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision that you can spend as a company with your ideal prospects and your ideal clients, the more they see you as the go-to experts, the less opportunity you have for them to wander off into the sales funnel or spending their buyer's journey with other competitive alternatives. When you do this well, you're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list when they go from awareness to consideration and consideration to decision. When you do this exceptionally well, there will be cases where your educational content resources and your educational events are so phenomenal, so world class, and so game changing, and getting them to understand how a company like theirs, how stakeholders like theirs navigate all of the big decisions that come with things that are directly related and adjacent to structured cabling. In some cases, that thought leadership, that subject matter expertise, that teaching, the consulting you're doing as part of your sales process, not only keeps you on the short list, but it knocks all, or at least most, of the competitive alternatives off of the short list, because they can't hold a candle to the value that you've been able to provide to your particular prospects and clients. So when it comes to creating informative, structured cabling content that's relevant to the target buyer, this is the kind of mindset. Recognize that it's a self-directed buyer's journey. Most of the research and decision making now happens without your sales team in the room. Like 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before sales contact, before vendor contact. We have to work extra hard to get back into the room to have an influence on how they research and compare different options and what they prioritize and what they don't. And the best way to earn our way back into the room is we need to show up as teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and even in the case of thought leaders. So how does this play out tactically for local, both local and regional and national, a combination of educational resources and events. So from a tactical perspective, from that buyer persona, your content calendar should drive blogs and podcasts and videos and email newsletters and email nurturing and resource kits and planning guides, and both in-person and virtual events. In-person events, opportunity to show them your showroom or your prototype data center and walk them through all the considerations on what they need to think about with both legacy structured cabling investments and well as where structured cabling is headed in the future. Perhaps in the course of these in-person events and virtual events, a chance to hear from some of your clients that sing your praises and become your best indirect salespeople and providing phenomenal amounts of social proof. And all of this, again, is designed to educate and build trust. And the more of those 28 touch points that they spend with you, the more likely it is that you're starving the oxygen away from the competitive alternatives and dramatically tipping the scales in favor of your company, not only creating content that's relevant to the target buyer, but earning the trust and ultimately earning the business and loyalty of those target buyers. Next question up is, how does a data center critical facilities company get more industrial construction sales? How does a data center critical facilities company get more industrial construction sales? That's a terrific question. And now we're operating over in the facilities part of the data center ecosystem as opposed to operators, technology companies, and a facilities related company that's specifically selling to another part of the data center ecosystem, construction, industrial construction. So what this means is we need to be very self-aware about what your company does well. In other words, where do you win most often? Where do your industrial construction clients get the most value? And that should help us narrow down where we've been most successful and where we anticipate being most successful going forward. So things like your logos, your case studies, your testimonials, your reviews, looking at your existing customers, what they have in common when you go through the CRM. All of that should help you back into an ideal client profile so you know with a lot more specificity what kind of industrial construction companies you want. In other words, where are they located geographically? How big or how small they are? You know, think Goldilocks, not too big, not too small. What's the size range in terms of revenue, or even better yet, in terms of headcount, number of employees that these industrial construction companies would typically have? The employee headcount becomes super helpful if you're normalizing for typical databases, leads and prospect databases, especially if you're using something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, potentially LinkedIn Campaign Manager. And in what industries do these industrial construction companies tend to work? Because when you overlay geography plus certain business models or certain industries, that oftentimes there's certain expertise that you'll need to do well in certain kinds of vertical markets, certain kind of industries, largely because either their requirements or actual regulatory issues or certifications, compliance investments that are required to do well. Like, for example, if you sell to healthcare, financial services, education, government, or certain geographic regions where certain requirements, certain compliance issues are just quite simply across the board. So for a facilities related company that's selling to industrial construction companies, start by getting really specific on who the companies are, defining them in your ideal client profile, your ICP, and then within those companies, who are the stakeholders that matter most. In a really small company, industrial construction company, you may be selling all the way to a CEO or someone in the C-suite. In a larger company, these are probably construction executives, director of construction, VP of construction, perhaps a chief construction officer or something like that. In some cases, they could be development officers, not to be confused with business development. Typically someone that's working on things related to like planning, site selection, bringing in all the different vendors and coordinating all the vendors that are necessary for these large projects that have to do with building the facilities. Again, you'll know your business model the best, where you excel, what kinds of projects you typically work on. And unless you're a complete startup, more than likely you've seen what kinds of stakeholders are most important to the relationships that you have with these clients. And I'd encourage you, when you're designating these buyer personas, to prioritize, just simply because the investments that you're going to need to make in doing customer insight research and creating and promoting helpful educational content and hosting, promoting, sponsoring these helpful educational events, both in virtual as well as in person, you're for sure going to need to prioritize, because you're not going to be able to be everything to all people. So once you know who the most important kind of stakeholder is, maybe it's a construction executive, construction officer, or something like that, that you might designate as a primary buyer persona. The secondary persona may be a facilities executive, facility director. Maybe it's, depending on the company size, could be a CEO or COO or something like that, or an investment officer. But again, it's your mileage will vary. But from there, once you know who they are, we need to figure out what's going on in their lives, where we have an opportunity to add value as early as possible in their buyer's journey and their research and decision-making process, and their considered process in between complete stranger and evaluating the options and eventually getting to the point where they're ready for a sales conversation. Because if we don't do that, what you're going to find now is we now live in a world where there's so much self-directed research that goes on that typically like 83% of that journey is over before you get to meet them. So the companies and the individuals that have a strong presence in that first 83% are crushing it. They're the ones that are dramatically influencing how industrial construction companies compare the different options, evaluate, weigh the pros and cons. A typical buyer's journey today may have as many as 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. So you may sponsor the most amazing golf tournament or have this epic cabana party at a big conference or something like that, but each of those only counts as one touch point. They come back from the conference, they're back to reality, and all of a sudden now they're dealing with all of these front burner issues, and you still need to figure out a way to have a role in as many of those other 25, 26 touch points as possible. So if you're thinking that just good sales follow-up is going to do it, I'd encourage you to think again, because are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to meet yet? Can I come in and pitch you? Can I come in and tell you how wonderful we are? That gets old really, really fast. But if you understand the typical journey that someone is going to go through in this kind of company, in an industrial construction company, in this kind of stakeholder role, what are their biggest goals that they're trying to figure out professionally? What's most important to their team? What's most important to their company? What are the things that are driving them nuts? What are their biggest challenges, stressors, concerns, all roadblocks? The better job you can do with showing up proactively and being the one that's the teacher and the consultant and the trusted advisor, the more airtime you earn with them, the more surface area of that buyer's journey, of that sales process that you're going to productively take up. And it will get to the point when you do this well, where your prospects and clients actually want to spend time with members of your sales team, because these pre-sales interactions are so over the top helpful in navigating what comes next and what comes next and what comes next. And you'll know what comes next because you've seen the pattern recognition, because you've worked with so many similar companies in the past, that this free consulting is so valuable that it feels like they're engaging with like a big $400, $500 or $1,000 an hour kind of consultant, or your local currency equivalent. So when you're able to successfully transform your account executive and your sales development rep to be seen more like teachers and consultants, it has a huge game-changing impact in how industrial construction stakeholders are going to research and compare the different options and ultimately evaluate the kind of company, that data center related facilities, critical facilities companies that they want to partner with. So what I encourage you to do with all of this across the board is to understand and appreciate just how much the journey has changed over the last 10 years. It used to be 10 years ago that you would spend about half of the sales cycle, about half of their journey with them. Now you're spending very little time with them. So much of this is happening without you being in the room. So we got to work extra hard to earn our way back into the room. I see a lot of companies make the mistake of thinking they can buy their way back into the room. So they overinvest in paid media and paid event sponsorships. That's not earning, that's forcing, that's buying. Along the same lines, every once in a while, I see people on LinkedIn that literally want to bribe people for taking a meeting or come do a demo with a gift card or something like that. That for sure is not earning your way in. And you're not going to be seen as teachers and consultants and experts with all of that. This is a long game. So in order to play the long game successfully and plant the seeds to make it possible for your company and your stakeholders to be seen as the definitive go-to experts at the intersection of data center critical facilities and industrial construction, you really got to know who they are, what they care about, and show up early and often on a very regular basis to add value to their professional lives. So when it comes to how data center critical facilities companies can get more industrial construction sales, we need to be there early. We need to be there often from a tactical basis, helpful educational blogs, videos, helpful educational emails, downloadable planning guides, reports, frameworks, educational events, both in person and virtually, and reframing your sales methodology so it feels a lot more like project management for aligning stakeholders around these huge kinds of initiatives. No one really is up at 2 o'clock in the morning anymore because they're not spending enough time with salespeople. No one really needs your account executives and your sales development reps to read prospects, what's on your website anymore. What they need is people that can come in and diagnose before they prescribe, because they have incredibly finely tuned, very granular expertise at the intersection of critical facilities company and what industrial construction companies want, especially in these stakeholder kinds of roles. The better job you can do that, the better job you're going to be with earning the ability to educate and build trust with these prospects and clients long enough so they become your next highly valued clients and long-term clients going forward. So we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back with our next 3 questions for the data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center industry, regardless of whether you work for an operator, technology or facilities company, construction or real estate or investment company, or outsourced sales and marketing, regardless of what your role is on the go-to-market team, whether you're in sales, marketing, account management, product, channel partnerships, or an executive leadership role. If you're looking to level up and elevate the role that you're having within the growth of the data center industry, you are for sure in the right place. And if you're getting great value from today's data center go-to-market sales marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button and feel free to leave a question in the comments about what you think we should be covering in future episodes of this live stream. So next question up is, how does a electrical and mechanical engineering firm respond to high data center related demands? Is it electrical and mechanical engineering, or is it mechanical and electrical engineering? Either way, how can an electrical and mechanical engineering firm respond to high data center related demand? I think what it largely comes down to is responding to demand depends on what capabilities you have in-house, where you've been most successful, your existing talent. Because if the talent is really, really strong, you know how long it takes from the time you hire new talent to new team members till they're fully ramped and productive. So you may have a recruiting kind of way of approaching all this. There's several dozen globally very active data center related recruiting firms who are helping to solve some of the talent related issues for companies throughout the data center ecosystem, including engineering, like mechanical and electrical engineering. For sure, there may be recruiters internally on your team who work at this issue. That's a different kind of marketing and sales process. And then there is onboarding and training your internal talent to make sure that you have a consistent base of knowledge so your client-facing team members are able to show up as consultants and teachers and trusted advisors very early on in the journey, so that you earn the ability to spend a big part of the buyer's journey, a big part of the sales cycle with your prospects and clients. This can be a big struggle for a lot of mechanical and engineering firms that are using a playbook, the same playbook that they've been using for like the last 10 years. Why is this a big issue? Because 10 years ago, a typical data center related client would have spent about half of their buyer's journey with your team. At the time, the number that was often referenced from CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, that's now part of Gartner, is 56% of the buyer's journey was over before sales contact. Add in 10 years of digital transformation, a couple of years of millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s, baby boomers retiring, a lot more Gen Z and millennials in decision-making roles, and we're now in a place where 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before vendor contact and sales contact. What that means is you're hardly in the room at all anymore unless you figure out a way to earn your way back into the room. And one of the most effective and one of the only ways to actually earn your way back into the room, as opposed to trying to force your way into the room, because forcing your way into the room with paid media doesn't give you the kind of positioning and respect that ultimately your prospects and clients are going to need to have productive relationships with your client-facing team members. Earning your way in is largely a function of helping your client-facing team members, your account executives, your business development reps, your marketers, your account managers, your project supervisors, your partnership relationship managers, helping them reposition themselves to be seen more as teachers and consultants and subject matter experts as opposed to their traditional job titles. Does this mean that everyone should go in immediately and switch out the job title and email signatures and on your LinkedIn profile and on your business cards? I don't know whether it's an immediate must do, but you should be having these conversations about what the future of these job roles look at. I'll give you a perfect example of this from another place in the data center ecosystem. When I talk to executives, both C-level executives and sales leaders and marketing leaders at data center operators, it's very common now to find that the account executives that are actively productive in those kinds of jobs are now more technical than they've ever had to be in the course of their careers. Some of them are so technical that their nights and weekends home computer labs look like small data centers. In other words, their level of knowledge is so beyond what typically people would expect of an account executive for that kind of company that they could literally leave their jobs tomorrow or have nights and weekends side projects where they're serving as a fractional CTO for small and medium-sized businesses. And yet their day job is being an account executive. This is what's happened, is everyone has been forced to level up, because with so much self-driven buyer's journey and YouTube and podcasts and webinars and all these self-guided, no one needs your client-facing team members to show up anymore and read your prospects and clients what they can find on their own, on your website, on social media, by asking questions of peers, on YouTube videos, on webinars, on podcasts. What they really need is they need your client team members to show up and diagnose before they prescribe. Diagnose before they prescribe a solution. Explore what the client's true needs are before they advise them on a certain path. And for a company that's involved in engineering, what this usually comes down to is understanding who your ideal clients are and who the most important stakeholders at those ideal clients, and using your pattern recognition, your muscle memory, to understand for this kind of stakeholder, for this kind of buyer persona at a particular kind of company that needs engineering and mechanical engineering, electrical and mechanical engineering support, this is what they typically would care about. How do you know that? Because you worked with dozens of other companies like this in the past. So not only are you able to answer their most basic questions, but you can help them anticipate what comes next. And essentially, the sales process looks a lot more like project management of helping the internal champion align with the most important stakeholders that are necessary for this kind of initiative for data centers that have strong or high data center demand that need your electrical and mechanical engineering related services. So there's a response that needs to happen on the HR and on the recruiting side. There's for sure a response that needs to happen on the go-to-market, on the sales and marketing side. And a big part of that is embracing having exceptionally valuable educational resources and educational events where you're able to use a one-to-many motion to have this information presented in what used to happen in one-on-one conversations. And it's not just that it's way more efficient if you're facing higher strong demand. It becomes a necessity because a lot of your most important stakeholders that you're selling to don't want to spend a lot of time with your sales team anymore. However, they are very willing to spend time learning from experts, especially experts that know exactly what companies like theirs should be thinking about when it comes to data center engineering, especially for understanding the different kinds of stakeholders that are involved on these decision committees and multidisciplinary cross-team, cross-department alignment that comes up. All of that can be exceptionally helpful. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to the electrical and mechanical, the engineering firms basically drawing a line in the sand that says, going forward, it's our goal to be the definitive experts in our space at the intersection of anything and everything having to do with engineering for data center related companies in a particular geographic region that are of a certain size, that are in certain kinds of industries, certain kinds of business models. And when you do that, it becomes a lot easier to have clarity around who to hire, who to invest in, what kinds of educational resources to invest in creating and promoting and distributing, what kinds of educational events to participate in. And if you do this well, it should also give you a lot more clarity on the kind of events, the kind of conferences that you should be investing in attending, speaking at, or sponsoring. I see a lot of waste in data center related conferences where you're not doing basic due diligence on matching their buyer personas and your buyer personas, their ideal client profile, their ideal attendee profile, and your ideal client profile. In other words, like, get the media kit, get the prospectus both from this year and last year, and see who attended last year, who they anticipate attending this year, and see how well those demographics match up with who you sell your engineering related services to. If it matches up pretty well, go forward. Attend, have multiple people attend, try to get editorial speaking opportunities, potentially sponsor a booth or sponsor some kind of special event at that particular conference. But if you don't get clarity that their demographics align up with your ideal client profile, it's really risky that you're just looking for a needle in a haystack. So all of this involves having incredible amounts of clarity, better clarity than you've ever had before in your career on your ideal client profile and your buyer personas. All of this it's incredibly important to recognize that most of these buyer personas are researching, comparing options, and evaluating engineering firms quite differently than they did as recently as 10 years ago, and figuring out what your plan of attack is going to be to modernizing your sales and marketing playbook so that you show up for the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context. So you get out of the vendor box, and so that they see you and your team as true subject matter experts on data center engineering. Next question. How does a data center racks and accessories provider develop new sales channels? How does a company that provides data center racks and related accessories develop new sales channels? So the first place I'm going to start is we need to understand, is your company the manufacturer of these racks and accessories, or are you essentially a manufacturer's rep or a reseller, an integrator for this particular company among a half a dozen or a few dozen different companies that you're a manufacturer's rep or distributor or reseller or integrator for? That makes a huge difference. Why does it make a difference? Because of margins and business model. If your company sells and installs racks and accessories among a half a dozen other related things that you do, I would encourage you to take a buyer-centric approach as opposed to a product-centric approach. What does this mean? That in order for you to earn your way in as early as possible in the buyer's journey, so you have a chance to be the one that's educating and building trust with your prospects and future clients, it's incredibly important to distance your company's expertise from the products that you rep. Because if you're just focused on getting attention and developing sales channels for the products that you rep, essentially you're a commodity provider. And there's nothing really protecting you from the race to the bottom in terms of bids and pricing and margins. If, on the other hand, racks and accessories, racks, cabinets, and accessories are just one of a handful of different things, different disciplines that you provide within data center technology, data center infrastructure, network infrastructure, then it's a lot easier for you to get your mind around who the most important stakeholders are, who the ideal clients are, and then developing helpful educational content, resources, educational events, experiences that allow your internal experts to get in as early as possible, as often as possible, the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context. So your prospects and clients see you as an expert on network infrastructure, as opposed to a vendor that's selling someone else's, or a reseller that's selling someone else's racks, cabinets, and accessories. If, on the other hand, your company actually is the manufacturer of racks and accessories, and you're exploring new sales channels, what I would encourage you to do is get really specific about the ideal client profile where you've been most successful. Where are you geographically having the most success and historically have had the most success? At what size companies are you having the most success? What's so small that they may not be able to afford your minimum order, minimum installation? What's so large that they may have more complicated needs than what you can currently address? So get very self-aware about that and have a range for a number of employees. And then, are there certain business models or verticals or industries where you do better than others? Once you have that ideal client profile locked down, then you can think about the kind of stakeholders that you need to educate and build trust with, that ultimately are showing a lot of early warning symptoms long before they realize that they need racks and accessories. So for a lot of companies, these may be director of digital infrastructure, network infrastructure. For really small companies, it may be a CTO or VP of IT or something like that. It could be a NOC, it could be engineering. There's a lot of different telecommunications. There's a lot of different kinds of providers that ultimately are adjacent to what would drive a data center rack or accessory kind of purchase. So get really clear on the companies where you've done best historically, what's in your case studies, your testimonials, your reviews, your logos, what, when you go look through your CRM at some of the recent closed won deals, what do you see? What do these companies all have in common? And then within these companies, who are the stakeholders that matter most? So when it comes to new sales channels, what's going to help drive the potential for sales channels is, as you are researching and documenting your buyer personas, you'll uncover watering holes or the resources that they tend to turn to, the online resources, the offline resources, for how each of these buyer personas learns and keeps up with their career. There's more than likely certain conferences, both offline conferences and online equivalents. There may be certain podcasts or YouTubers that they're heavily influenced by. There may be certain channel programs they belong to. There may be associations that they belong to. There may be publications that they read, newsletters they subscribe to. There's a lot of different, and of course, when it comes to network infrastructure, there's even training and certification programs and credentials that they may all have in common. When you discover these commonalities, then it becomes a lot easier to look for the channels that you need to prioritize. Like, for example, once you have consensus on that buyer persona, even when it comes to something as basic as like LinkedIn or YouTube, you'll get a lot more specific about like LinkedIn groups that they all tend to belong to, or hashtags that are on topics directly related to their biggest goals or the biggest challenges that surface during that buyer persona research. So the buyer persona research will help drive a lot of what you would want to prioritize for new sales channels. I also, when people start talking about sales channels, a lot of times they're talking about indirect sales channels, like a channel partner program, which in a lot of cases could be like a managed service provider, an MSP, or a network integrator, or a data center integrator, or a data center consultancy, or something like that. So if you're going to invest in educating and building trust with direct customers as well as indirect customers like channel partners, that's really a different kind of playbook. And that's why on a go-to-market team, you'll typically, that has an indirect model as well as a direct model. The direct model would be like your marketers and your account executives, your sales development reps, your account managers on the direct side. And then on the indirect side, you potentially would have one or more people in different roles on the channel partnership role. You could have a channel partnership marketer, someone that's responsible for developing educational resources and educational events to help recruit potential channel partners. A lot of companies in the data center ecosystem completely overlook the need to invest in that kind of program. What's super interesting about it's not so much that they overlook it. I think there's a certain entitlement and lack of self-awareness, and they feel that what they have is so special that MSPs are going to beat a pair, or equivalent channel partners are going to beat a path to their door because what they have doesn't require actually any marketing. And early on in my career, I worked with Microsoft's small business channel partner program. And even back then, Microsoft really didn't have to work too hard to get consultancies and resellers and managed service providers to be interested in partnering with Microsoft. And it's even less of an issue today. There, for sure, if you were in a channel role with like Cisco or Microsoft or Red Hat or Sonic or something like that, you will not have to work as hard to get attention. You can focus more on onboarding and expanding and channel enablement, channel activation. If you're a much smaller company, then yeah, for sure, you have to create a situation where you're educating and building trust with potential channel partners in the same way that you educate and build trust with direct clients, with direct prospects for data center racks and accessories. So that's the pre-sales. And then on the post-sales side, once a channel partner is signed on and onboarded, they'll go through a similar kind of onboarding that you may have for your internal sales team and your internal services team. Then you need to stay in front of them on a regular basis and have an appreciation for the fact that your direct sales force, your direct services team works for your company 40 plus hours a week. Your channel partners are juggling 5, 10 or more different relationships. So you're only going to get a slice of that. So because of that, the ramp time tends to be longer. But either way, they still need support. They still need to be marketed to on a regular basis. If you think about if you've ever done customer marketing to help your existing customers learn about what else you can help them with, like cross sells, upsells, that kind of stuff, your channel partners also need enablement materials. They need resources to help them identify opportunities among their existing client base. They need training both on the sales side and on the services side, and they need a lot of it on a regular basis. They'll almost certainly need some co-selling opportunities where your channel account managers are jointly selling along with the channel partners. It's a completely different motion. That's why so many companies that are exploring having an indirect sales channel will ultimately segregate the channel folks from the direct kind of team. And then, of course, you also need rules for preventing channel conflict. Channel deal registration. How do you prevent channel partners from fighting with each other, channel account managers internally from fighting with each other, your direct reps stepping on the toes of your channel partners and vice versa? It's not easy, but ultimately you're going to need to figure that out if you're going to have success with developing that channel partner kind of sales channel. But these are some of the considerations that a data center racks and accessories provider should be thinking about when it comes to developing a new sales channel. And of course, make sure that you lean into the reality, today's marketplace reality, where so much of the research and decision-making and comparing options now happens in a self-propelled, self-driven kind of buyer's journey. It used to be like 10 years ago, you could count on your sales team, your channel managers being able to spend like half of a typical journey with prospects and clients. At the time, CEB, the corporate executive board that's now part of Gartner, identified that about 56% of a typical sales cycle buyer's journey was over before vendor contact, before sales contact. Add in like 10 years of digital transformation and generational changes. And now we're in a place where like 83% of a typical journey is over before you get to meet a prospect or a client. And that's a huge, huge challenge to companies that still depend on a very old school traditional kind of sales playbook, but it's a really big opportunity for like a data center racks and accessories, data center rack and cabinet kind of company to decide that they want to be seen as the definitive go-to experts in the industry for a particular geographic region, for a particular company size, for particular industries and sales channels, with deep expertise, having amazingly helpful educational resources, having amazingly helpful educational events, so that you're spending as many of those typical 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision with your ideal prospects and your ideal clients. And again, when it comes to new sales channels, if you're looking to develop a channel partner program, I would encourage you to have a separate ideal client profile or ideal partner profile, and separate buyer personas, and separate funding, and separate ways of tracking your SMART goals, your specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound goals, and key performance indicators, KPIs, and OKRs, objectives, just different metrics that you use to evaluate channel partner success and channel partner progress compared to direct sales. It's a completely different ballgame. It is completely different unit economics, completely different cycle. But I can tell you for sure, there are a lot of companies in the technology space that wouldn't be anywhere near where they are if they didn't have a phenomenal channel partner ecosystem over the past few decades. So those are some things to think about for a data center rack and accessories provider that wants to develop new sales channels. The final question for this week's data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A live stream is, oh, by the way, if you've gotten good value from this week's data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A live stream, make sure that you hit the like button, and feel free to leave a question in the comments that you'd like us to consider answering in a upcoming episode. We do these shows each week. So the last question that we'll be addressing for this week is, how do we improve mission-critical data center sales outreach for a design, build, and management company? How do we improve mission-critical data center sales outreach for a design, build, and management company? So your company is in the construction part of the data center ecosystem, designing, building, and managing critical facilities building data centers. It's possible also, when we talk about critical facilities, you may design, build, and manage outside of the data center ecosystem. This would be like emergency operations centers or hospitals or rescue, first responder kind of facilities. However, we're focusing on just data centers here. So how do we improve mission critical data center sales outreach for design, build, and management? What it largely comes down to is understanding where you've had the most success. So as long as your company has an established client base, there probably are some breadcrumbs. There probably are some good markers that help you see what kinds of companies have historically gotten the most value from your design, build, and management related services, whether they're enterprise data centers, whether they're data center operators like colocation or hyperscale or wholesale, or modular even. Modular typically does their own designing and building. Edge, that's a great niche with the world we're moving towards, where so much of AI and smart cities needs low latency applications, the whole decentralized data center movement. So where have you done best? What kinds of places within the data center ecosystem? And then geographically, where are your best clients located? Are they just in your own country? Are they in a cluster of a region of countries? Can you cover a whole continent? Marketing and selling your design, build, and management services. And what sizes are the best fit for what you do? What enterprise data centers or data center operators are so small that they wouldn't be able to afford your minimums, they wouldn't be profitable clients? And what clients are so large that they may be out of your league? They may not be profitable to sell to market, to service for design, build, and management on an ongoing basis. So you should have a geographic identifier sitting in your ideal client profile. You should have company size, and there may be industries or business models or verticals where you do better than others because of compliance related issues that are necessary, like in healthcare or financial services or education or government or something along those lines. In certain kinds of regions, you may be able not to do business at all if you can't check off the box for compliance and regulatory kinds of issues with your existing talent and services capabilities around design, build, and management. But in terms of outreach, what I'd encourage you to think about is that a lot of your stakeholders will now research and compare options and evaluate different kind of companies very differently than they would have as recently as 10 years ago. The self-driven buyer's journey is a really, really big deal. It cuts across the entire data center ecosystem. And unless you're selling to extreme edge cases where your data center buyers are basically haven't adjusted to the reality of using smartphones or search engines or social media or YouTube videos or podcasts or review sites to influence how they evaluate the different options, you more than likely are going to need a very different playbook than you did as recently as 10 years ago. And the crazy part with all of this is I don't know who, when people are clinging to the past and not willing to make adjustments to how they go to market, I don't know who they think they're selling to. I'm Gen X. And I hang around with, in the data center ecosystem, quite a few baby boomers at different ends of the range of being baby boomers. And just about everyone of that generation that I hang around with the data center ecosystem is 100% comfortable communicating on LinkedIn. And they go to webinars and they watch YouTube videos and they get interviewed and listen to podcasts. So I don't know who this imaginary person is that lives in the past that isn't influenced by this. So going forward, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to keep fighting this kicking and screaming when the best way for your client-facing team members across marketing, your sales development reps, your account executives, your account managers, your project managers, everyone who's involved in design, build, and management, pre-sales, needs to really be showing up more as consultants and teachers and subject matter experts and trusted advisors, as opposed to just vendor sales. In other words, if there's still a sales related job title sitting on the business card, in the email signature, on the LinkedIn profile, you're not doing yourself any favors, because people are more sales allergic than they've ever been. And in a lot of these initiatives, a lot of these campaigns, historically, these were things that sales teams leaned on marketers to take care of for them. But marketers can really no longer afford to punt that back to marketing and not being involved. It really is a collaborative effort now, with the whole team being prepared to show up as early as possible in that journey and earn their way in onto the buyer side of the table, so that they're seen as experts throughout the full journey. It's about getting into with the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context, so those prospects or those future clients see your company as the definitive go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with design, build, and data center related management topics. So from a tactical perspective, fantastic blogs, fantastic videos, great downloadable premium content planning guides, templates to help them get initiative, and of course, great educational events, educational offline events, breakfast seminars, lunch and learns, live streams, webinars, webinar panels, and even when you're participating at other people's conferences, focusing on how you can add educational value around the most important issues that are top of mind for today's buyers of design, build, and data center related management services. And this is for sure a big mindset change for a lot of companies where the culture hasn't changed much in decades, and they're still using a very traditional playbook from 5-10 years ago that really hasn't adjusted to this new reality yet. So what the sales outreach really should be looking for is, instead of trying to convince people to elope with your sales team on the first date, which would make for a pretty amusing, like Ashton Kutcher or Mila Kunis kind of romantic comedy movie, it doesn't make for a good comedy. It doesn't make for a good situation at all when it comes to your data center stakeholders. They don't want to be pressured into taking a sales meeting just because your sales team has a quota to make in terms of activities. But the same stakeholders have some pretty big goals that they're trying to achieve with designing, getting their data centers designed and built and managed. They have a lot of stressors and frustrations around design, build, and management. And to the extent that you have extreme empathy and understand that buyer insight, that buyer persona insight of what their biggest goals are, what their biggest challenges are at the intersection of data center design, build, and management, and you can show up early and often as the one who provides an enormous amount of education and trust building content and events experiences, you earn your way in a way that they actually want to engage with your company. Does this mean that everyone that's in these client facing roles needs better synonyms to show up as teachers, consultants, and subject matter experts? Yes However, in most cases, it's a mindset issue more than anything, is realizing that we need to have extreme empathy for what our buyer personas are going through and figure out ways to earn our way back in a way that helps them. Because understand that, like, if you decide not to do this, if you abdicate this, you say, that's marketing's job, or let somebody else do this, essentially what you're doing is you're allowing that direct competitor, indirect competitor, non-business model competitor, conference, publication, whatever, someone is teaching your prospects and future clients how to evaluate, how to project manage, how to align internally their stakeholders, their internal champion, around anything and everything having to do with data center design, build, and management. To the extent that you're the one that's able to get in and the teacher that helps spread this great educational content throughout the full decision committee. Make no mistake, there's no such thing as a decision maker anymore. We know it's a decision-making committee. Your educational content and events are the key accelerator that helps that messaging, that value, to flow to multiple stakeholders in the organization, so they start to use your methodology that you've trained them on as the methodology that they use to evaluate all of the competitive alternatives. To the extent that you do this well, you're nearly guaranteed to stay on the short list throughout the full journey. When you do this exceptionally well at a world-class level, your educational events, your educational content resources, the expertise that you impart among these prospects and clients start to gradually knock out competitive alternatives that aren't even showing up in the way that you're showing up. So much to the point that in certain circumstances, these investments that you've made on your part in doing this with these particular buyer personas, with these particular stakeholders, knock out so many of the competitive alternatives that they get to the decision stage. They're finally ready for a sales conversation. And all the competitive alternatives have been disqualified. They're gone. Your resources and your events did the whole job, and now it's like a layup to get the deal to close. So the question is, are you ready to make investments in go-to-market and sales and marketing that reflect today's modern realities of how data center decision makers research and compare options for data center design, build, and management? Or are you selling to this mythical outlier who lives in the extreme past, who they're an internal champion for a data center, yet they don't use a smartphone or LinkedIn or watch YouTube videos or attend podcasts or speak at podcasts or webinars or any of this stuff? So the reality is, if you're serious about being that mission critical data center provider that does design, build, and management, all of your sales outreach should be focused on getting the right people in the right places at the right time to show up in the right context, so that they no longer see your sales team as salespeople from a vendor. They now see your sales team as expert consultants that help them project manage and align across their internal team members when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center design, build, and management. That's what happens when we go an hour and a quarter nonstop with providing tremendous amounts of value at the intersection of data center, go-to-market, sales, and marketing. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, host of the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. I'm so glad that you were able to join us for this week's show. If you want to make sure that you keep up with the latest educational resources and events across the full data center ecosystem, across the full go-to-market team, make sure that you're subscribed to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter, which comes out each Sunday directly to your email inbox. You can subscribe at www.dcsmi.com. And make sure on your way out, if you got great value from today's live stream, that you hit the like button, and feel free to leave us a suggestion for a future topic in the comments. Until next week, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. Take care now. Have a great week, and we'll see you back next time.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.